Hi, everybody. Shavua Tov. Rabbi Dan here. And at least for the time being, Rabbi Dan here alone. I'm just going to make sure that the streaming is working properly. So bear with me 1 second here. And at least for the time being, Rabbi Dan here alone. Make sure that the streaming is working properly. So we just 1 second here. Okay, so that might have been strange. You might have been hearing me talk to me. In any case, it's perfect for Selichot. Shavua Tov, everyone. And I have to say it's a bit of a bizarre situation because you have to picture here I am in the sanctuary of the Whalers Church that seats probably, I don't know, 500 or 600, and I'm here by myself. And it's late at night, and it's really quite a stunning space. But to say it's unusual is probably an understatement. And certainly, having done Selichot last year, also alone, back in our sanctuary, it's a different space, it's a different time, and yet there is still a sense of really how special this night is and what this service is really all about. So before we do the service itself, I wanted to, first of all, just give a little bit of background on what Selichot is, because I think a lot of times we do things we don't actually know where they come from, how long they've been around as a custom, why it was created the way that it was, and so on. And then also to share just a little bit of a teaching before we begin. So the first is really, what is this service about, right? What is Selichot about? Selichot is both a service, but it refers actually more generally to a series of prayers. The word slicha in Hebrew means to forgive or forgiveness or to ask for forgiveness, right? That's ultimately speaking what we are seeking in this period of time of Elul and the period of time of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and the Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, is trying to understand and sort of internalize this concept of both seeking forgiveness and also bestowing forgiveness, and the complexities that are a part of that. And so the process of really, again, the service of Selichot is, again, not, it's not the same for every community, and it's not the same even for every stream of Judaism. For the Sephardim, the Sephardic rites, they actually begin the process of saying Selichot prayers at the very beginning of the month of Elul, and they do it essentially every day. That there are Selichot prayers, specific designed liturgy that are said as part of the regular process of services throughout the month of Elul. For the Ashkenazic rite, for those of us that come from Eastern Europe and have that background, generally speaking, the service of Selichot is either going to be the Shabbat immediately preceding the high holidays or the one that is right before that. And this is one of those years where we're really actually 2 Shabbatot before the high holidays begin, as they begin really a week from Monday night. And the logic of that is that there was a tradition many, many, many generations ago for the Ashkenazim to actually start fasting, not a 24-hour or 25-hour sundown to sundown fast, but more akin to what our Muslim brothers and sisters do during Ramadan, in which there is a fast really from sunup to sundown. And that was done, in fact, actually for 10 days leading up to and through Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And it had to be done in such a way that it wasn't coinciding with the actual days of the holiday, because it's forbidden to fast on festivals and on Chagim, with very rare exceptions like Tisha B'Av, which is a whole other story. So ultimately speaking, the purpose, whether you're Ashkenazi or Sephardi, is to get into the mindset of what it is to ask God for forgiveness, right? We're not talking about asking for forgiveness necessarily from people, but really asking for forgiveness from God. And the idea is that if it's like any other thing, right? We wouldn't start to run, we wouldn't start to do other things unless there was some way, ultimately speaking, of warming up, of getting ourselves prepared in some form or the other. So the whole month of Elul is preparation, and really the days between this evening of Selichot and all the way through Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, this is really what it's kind of all about. One last thing to point out, right? Why are we doing the service? For us, feels very late at night. For me, it feels very late at night. But the reality is, for most of the Jewish world, Selichot actually won't really begin until after midnight. And this actually has more to do with Jewish mysticism than anything else. and a belief that actually the most traditional approach is to say the Selichot before, or really at the beginning of the morning, right before the sun rises. So actually many communities, the Selichot services, like in Sephardic shuls, will be very early in the morning. Most Ashkenazi shuls tonight, though, won't begin until after midnight. And that has to do, again, with a sort of mystical, Kabbalistic belief that there are certain times of the day in which we are closest to God. And therefore, when we are asking God for slicha, for forgiveness, that we want to try to do it in the most opportune, most sort of idealized way. So the tradition, again, is to not to start until at least midnight and beyond. In our case, your rabbi can't really stay up to midnight anymore, to be frank. So those days are not so much, for me. But just to say, for any of you who are interested, if you decide to stay up later, my guess is that these days you probably can watch Selichot services from all over the world and be able to watch them from where you are, where you're sitting. So if you happen to have the koach for it, check it out. And if nothing else, Google around, see. And tonight we're going to do only really a handful of the Selichot. We have a service that we do ourselves. But the list of Selichot prayers is actually quite large. And you might find actually that there's a lot of wonderful variants that you might appreciate. So, okay, that was my explanation. Now I just want to give a 5-minute kind of teaching or framing if I can. So this comes from a section of Maimonides' writing. And at first it may not seem like it actually has anything to do with the concept of Selichot or forgiveness. But really he's talking about actually a concept of what he calls tov lev. Okay, the words in Hebrew, tov means good and lev means heart. So really it means, right, a good heart. And what is that ultimately about? And he says really here, goodness of heart is something that falls between meanness and excessive kindness. Okay, so tov lev, goodness of heart, falls between meanness and excessive kindness. And because these virtues, Maimonides says, do not have a name in our language, right? Hebrew doesn't really have a name for those two things that he just described. It is necessary to explain them and to explain what the philosophers want. A good heart, tov lev, this is called to one for whom all his intentions are to improve the state of human beings with his body, with the person's wisdoms, with the person's money even, to the maximum of their ability, but without causing any harm or contempt. Okay, in other words, the definition of tov lev is somebody who uses every aspect of themselves, their body, their mind, their resources, be it financial or otherwise, to the maximum of their ability without causing any harm or contempt. Now, he describes this as the middle path. The mean one, however, he is the opposite of this and is one who does not want to contribute to humanity a thing, even things which he is not lacking and would not be a bother to him, nor cause him damage. This is the farthest extreme. And the excessively good heart, this, on the opposite side of things, is one who does all the things listed above in the definition of a good heart, of a tov lev, but does them even when they cause that person great damage or contempt or trouble, or even, in the extreme case, a great loss. So ultimately speaking, what do we learn from Maimonides? He says that our pursuit really to create ourselves as tov lev, right, of goodness of heart, is to avoid the two extremes. One obvious extreme is to avoid being, as he says, mean, right? Being a contemptuous person, one who doesn't share, doesn't consider themselves a part of the world, who is callous towards others, even when they are able to help. But there is also another side of it, which is someone that is excessively good, someone that literally gives of themselves to the point in which they are hurting themselves to save others. And in Judaism, that actually really is a no-no. And it's a fine line between these things, but he delineates these extremes not to tell us really about the extremes, but tell us about the middle, right? About what it is that we are really trying to do to be good people, right? To be people who have a tov lev, a goodness of heart. And it's to try to find a balance between, right, being selfish and self-aggrandizing and self-focused, and being overly and sort of, almost to a point of painfully considerate of others' feelings and others' needs before our own. And I think in some ways, the act really, what ties this idea to Selichot is it's the same kind of process for us, right? That we don't view ourselves, and we shouldn't view ourselves as perfect or perfection. That is not what human beings are. It never has been, even with Adam, even with Eve, from the very beginning, is not about what we are. We're something really in pursuit of in-between. We're trying to create a circumstance in which we are caring and considerate and giving to others, but at the same time, not doing so at our own expense and our own loss. And in the process of really preparing for the high holidays, we're in the similar vein. Because if we're looking introspectively, we're looking at ourselves, we can't be so judgmental of ourselves to say, right, that everything that we do, if we do it for ourselves, means that we are mean, or saying that if we do things that are, good for others, but we do them without consideration for our own needs and our own faults. This is where we struggle, right? This is where the tension lies. And that's really a lot of what this time period is about that tension between, on the one hand, pursuing and seeking forgiveness, acknowledging our shortcomings, our shortfalls, or even our sins, but not doing so to the point in which we are walking around self-flagellating, striking ourselves, making ourselves feel like we are lowly or worms or anything like that, right? We have to somehow at the same time build ourselves up and yet do so with an awareness, right? A consciousness that even the best of us, even those of us who really do our very best or try our very best, if we really look at the last year and what we've done, chances are we've got a whole list of things in which we behaved improperly, in which we were in fact mean, as Maimonides describes. And I think that's really where we all are in every single year, but I think especially this year, it's helpful for us to think about, right? Is to think about the fact that our pursuit of forgiveness doesn't happen in a vacuum, that we're really all doing it together. And we're trying as best as we can to find the middle road. And I hope that tonight, this service will be helpful to you wherever you may be, in whatever capacity you may be watching or listening, to begin that process for yourself. And I certainly love this service because, well, that was embarrassing. For me, there you go, I can say a slichot to myself, forgive myself for fall. For me, that these are melodies that tie me back to davening next to my dad and my brother. And matter of fact, they're the ones who taught me how to do this service in the first place. So in any case, now here's the mea culpa for me. I thought more people would be here in person, and I realized we never sent out a digital copy of this. So you don't really have it in front of you. You're going to have to really just listen and contemplate. Hopefully next year we'll be in person and won't be as much of a problem. So we begin by chanting, if I remember correctly, it is from the 27th Psalm, but one of our more familiar phrases and beautiful teachings, as Sinai. I lift my eyes up to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. Me'ayin yabo ezri esainai el harim me'ayin yabo ezri me'im Adonai oseh Shamayim Baretz Ezri Me'im Adonai Oseh Shamayim Baretz. And now one of the customary psalms that helps to begin a Selichot service is Ashrae. So we're just going to do the opening lines and the closing line. Ashrae, Yoshrae, Meitecha, Od Yalelucha, Od Yalelucha, Ashrae, Yoshrae, Meitecha, Od Yalucha, Od Yalucha, Selah. V'anachnu nevarech ya, me'ata v'ad olam, me'ata v'ad olam, me'ata v'ad olam, Hallelujah. 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 now rise in body or spirit for the Chatzi Kaddish. And the tradition is to use the nusach, the melody, the sort of standard music of different parts of the year, change depending on the service and all sorts of things. So this is the melody that is traditionally used for the high holidays themselves. This is really more usually the cantor's vein. I'll do my very best to chant it as best as I can. Yit kadha, veit kadha. Hold on a second. Let's start this again. Yit kadha. Boy, give me one second. Yit kadha, veit kadha. Shemer ha'baha ve'alma divrach yirutei ve'hamlich malchutei b'chayechon u'yomechon ובחיי לכל בית ישראל מעגלה ובזמן קריב וימרו אמן יש מרבה מברך לעולם לעלמי העולם יתברך יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי דקודשא בריחו לעילה ולעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמא ויאמרו amen. So the next several pages are introductions, in essence, to the recitation of the 13 attributes. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum B'Chanu. And all of this is really a callback to one of the first examples of human beings asking God for forgiveness. And this is really Moshe asking for forgiveness on behalf of the people after the golden calf. And so it becomes a sort of foundational, especially on Yom Kippur. But really all of the festivals, we take the Torah out of the Ark, for example, we recite the 13 attributes 3 times over. So there are 3 different sections. Each one will do a reading, one case a little bit of a singing, and the end of each one of them will be, again, the recitation of the 13 attributes. So while you may not have this in front of you, if you Google very quickly, if you're in front of a computer, you can Google the 13 attributes and it will show up. And if not, my guess is after years of hearing it, my guess is that you'll be able to sing along with me. But first, just a little bit of a reading to introduce. God of forgiveness, we come before you in need of compassion. At Sinai, you spoke words that guide our lives to this day. But our ancestors lost faith in you, lost hope in their Redeemer. With one voice, they had promised, we will do and we will obey. And yet stiff-necked, they broke their word, adoring an idol of gold. How wondrous your compassion in the face of their rebellion, your forgiveness in that moment of human weakness and doubt. We too have broken promises to you. We too worship the work of our own hands. We too make of gold a god. And we too forsake your word. At Sinai, you revealed 13 attributes of mercy, and these aspects of your nature, your very essence, we now recall. El melech yoshev al kisei rachamim, mitnaheg b'chasidut, mochel abanot amo, ma'avir rishon rishon, marbe mechila l'chataim, uslicha לפושעים, עושה צדקות עם כל בשר ורוח, לא חרטם תגמור. אל הורית לנו לומר 13, זכור לנו היום ברית 13, כמו שהודעת לנו בקדם, כמו שכתוב. וירד אדוני בענן, ויתייצב עמו שם, ויקרא בשם אדוני, ויעבור אדוני על פניו, ויקרא אדוני, אדוני, אל רחום בחנון, ערך אפיים, ברב חסד ואמת, נוצר חסד לאלפים, נושא עוון ופשע, וחטא ונקה. In all your ways be aware of God, for there is no sovereign without a people. Ein melech v'lo am. We are the chariot on which God's glory rides, for there is no sovereign without a people. Let the love of God be spread through our deeds, for there is no sovereign without a people. You are my servant, Israel. I will be glorified through you, for there is no sovereign without a people. Where is God? Anywhere we let God in, for there is no sovereign without a people. Ein melech v'lo am. Eternal God, you revealed to Moses your 13 attributes of mercy. They exist in the world through our awareness. They transform the world through our actions. We speak them now as both prayer and aspiration. Adonai, Adonai, el-Rachum b'chanun, erech apayim, v'rav chesed v'emet, notzer chesed lahalafim, נושא עוון ופשע, וחטא ונקה. לו אחזה פניו בליבי ויטה. If I could see God's face within my heart, I'd see the face of a garden, compassionate to weed and flower alike, patiently pruning, graciously planting, loving the endless hours of tending and nurturing the earth, seeds, roots, all that grows. And true to the essence of the gardener's work, forgiving the fallen branches, the withered petals, the cracked stones, the broken stems. If I could see God's face within my heart, I'd see the human face in 1,000 acts of mercy. The one who gives bread to the hungry and shelters the lost, who hears the voice of grief, and makes room for the stranger, who brings relief to the blind, the bent, the unjustly imprisoned, and is true to the essence of holy work, defying evil, healing brokenness, easing pain, and in the end, forgiving ourselves as God forgives us. Adonai, Adonai, el-Rachum b'chanun, erech apayim, v'rav chesed v'emet, notzer chesed lahalafim, נושא עוון ופשע, וחטא ונקה. Adonai, Adonai, God, compassionate, gracious, endlessly patient, loving, and true, showing mercy to the 1000th generation, forgiving evil, defiance, and wrongdoing, and ultimately granting pardon. Shema Koleinu Adonai Eloheinu Us verachem aleinu vekabel merachamim uberatzon et tefilateinu Hashivenu Adonai Elecha V'nashuva Chadesh Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. Hear our call, Adonai, our God, show us compassion. Accept our prayer with love and goodwill. Take us back, Adonai. Let us come back to you. Renew our days as in the past. Hear our words, Adonai. Understand our unspoken thoughts. May the speech of our mouth and our heart's quiet prayer be acceptable to you, Adonai, our rock and our redeemer. Do not cast us away from your presence or cut us off from your Holy Spirit. Do not cast us away when we are old, as our strength diminishes. Do not forsake us. Do not forsake us, Adonai. Be not far from us, our God. With hope, Adonai, we await you. Surely you, Adonai, our God, you will answer. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Al tashlichenu milfanecha, Einai veruach kodshecha, Al tikach mimenu Einai, Al tashlichenu letzikna, Einai kichot kochenu, Al ta'azvenu, Einai, Al ta'azvenu, Adonai Eloheinu, Einai, Al tirchak mimenu. Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, tavo lefanecha tefilatenu, v'al tit'alam mitachanunenu, she'en anachnu azefanim u'kshei oref, lomar lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, tzadikim anachnu v'lo chatan, aval anachnu v'avotenu v'imotenu chatanu. Our God and God of all generations, may our prayers reach your presence, and when we turn to you, do not be indifferent. Eternal One, our God and God of our ancestors, we do not say to you in arrogance and stubbornness, we are blameless and do nothing. In truth, we and our forebears have stumbled, we have fallen. Gazalu dibanu, do Hevinu Vehirshanu Zanu Chamasnu Tafanu Shaker Yatsnura Kizamnu Latnu Maradu Niatnu Saranu Avinu Ashanu Tsaranu Kishinu Oref Rashanu Shichatnu Tiabnu Tainu Titanu. So my first Selichot, which is now, this will be my 7th, I believe, was really a very special one for me because my brother was with me, and if memory serves me, my dad might have been there also, but certainly my brother, and he taught me the next prayer we're going to do, which is one of the traditional classic Selichot, that's known as Mi She'ana. And the question Mi means who, and She'ana is answers. Ana is to answer, right? So the question is sort of a rhetorical question. Who answers when each of our ancestors throughout their lives, when they're in their most challenging time, right? Who answers them? So that's a rhetorical question because we know the answer, right? The answer is God. But in each of these stories, if you really take a moment to go through them, and I'm sorry that you don't have the text in front of you, but it is in our High Holiday Prayer Book in the Yom Kippur service. It's probably, again, in their Selichot service, which is built in there. It sort of goes through step by step. Even if you don't know all the words, you'll start to recognize some of the names, right? Sarah, Avraham, Yitzchak, Rivka, Yaakov, Leah, Rachel, Yosef, Mialdiot, Ivriot is the handmaidens, the women who helped save the Jewish children from the Egyptian decree, right? All right? All of these are different people in our history: Moshe, Miriam, Aharon, and the thing is, the piyut ends, right? The piece of liturgy ends, but really, in essence, this is a list in which, in every generation, there is a call, there is a beseeching to God for help. And that is both true of our narratives, our stories of our people, but also for each of us, right? Chances are that in the last year, there's been a time in which we have called out for help. And the challenge, of course, is what happens when it, at least seemingly, is not answered. So this is one of the piyutim of Slicha to remind us that some of that idea of our relationship with God also has to begin with a certain amount of humility. If we ask God for everything and expect God to do everything, it's something of already an imbalance. So perhaps the best thing to do is to come with a bit of humility and a bit of reminding ourselves of the history of God answering our ancestors' prayers, and the hope that God will answer our most powerful prayer of the High Holiday period, which is the prayer of Slichot, the prayer of asking for forgiveness for the things that we have done wrong, both intentionally and otherwise. So it has a sort of repeating pattern to it, and hopefully you'll pick it up as we go, and I'll try to give myself a little bit of a rhythm. Misha'anaha l'sarai meheinu beziknata. You say, Uya'aneinu, God answers. Misha'anaha l'ramavinu beharham horia Uya'aneinu. Misha'anaha l'yitzchak ben amcheneka d'algarei hamizbeach Uya'aneinu Misha'ana Lerivka Beryona Uya'aneinu Misha'ana Le'Yakov Bevetel Uya'aneinu Misha'ana Leleha Be'itzvah Uya'aneinu Misha'ana לרחל בצפונה הוא יעננו משענה ליוסף בבית הסורים הוא יעננו משענה לעדות העבריות על האבנים הוא יעננו משענה ליוכבד על שפת היער הוא יעננו משענה לאבותינו לאמותינו על ים סוף הוא יעננו משענה למשה בחורב הוא יעננו משענה למרים בברכה הוא יעננו משענה לאהרון במכתה הוא יעננו משענה לבנות צלופחד בעמדן פתח אוהל מועד הוא יעננו משענה לאליהו בקול דממה דקה במדבר הוא יעננו יאללה 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 הוא יעננו יאללה 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 הוא יעננו. Someday we'll schlep Rabbi Jonah out here to sing that with me again sometime. I would love that very much. But I thank him for the many things he's taught me in my life. I love that view. So we're going to conclude our service, which is customary during the entire month of Elul, with the singing of Akhachal, which comes from, again, I think the 27th Psalm. And Akhachal means that there's one thing that I ask of God. In the case of the psalmist, he says, one thing I ask of God, and for this I yearn, to dwell in the house of God all the days of my life, to behold God's beauty and to pray in God's sanctuary. But you may have a different question. What is your question this year for God? If you could ask one question of God, what might it be? So I want you to just take a moment for yourself, as I will do the same. And then we will conclude by singing Akhachal, and then I'm going to do my very best to get a sound out of the shofar, and we'll see how that goes. So just take a moment for yourself. Akhachalti meit Adonai ota bakesh. Akhachalti meit Adonai ota bakesh. Shifti bebeit Adonai כל ימי חיי, לחזות בנועם אדוני, ולבקר בהיכלו. לחזות בנועם אדוני, ולבקר בהיכלו. So like I said, I'm not a Baal Tikiyah, Baal Shofar. I'm not a master of blowing the shofar, but I generally can usually get a sound out eventually. So the only thing I'm going to recommend is if you had the volume up on your computer or your iPhone or your iPad or whatever you may be watching on, it might be a good idea to turn it down slightly, and then we'll see. If it's too low, then you can always turn it up. Well, I'm a little out of shape, but you get hopefully a little bit of the essence of just how beautiful and powerful this shofar is. And I thank you for joining me virtually. And I felt like you were here with me in spirit. And I hope this was a meaningful beginning to our process of working together on this idea of forgiveness, of both asking and forgiving it, of others, of God, of ourselves. It's a remarkable time of year. And while I know that this year, once again, is not the way that any of us hoped that it would quite work out, don't worry about what there isn't. Focus on what there is. And there is once again an opportunity to go into the depths, to find that part of ourselves which for the rest of the year we tend to hide away, and to open it up, to find that space within ourselves to change, to grow, to challenge, to cry, to sing, to celebrate. And may we, certainly next year, be able to do that together in person again. But in the meanwhile, let us really look at this year as an opportunity, not as a loss. And I really am trying to do that as best as I can. And this was a great way to start. So I wish you all a Shavua Tov. Stay safe, take care of yourselves, take care of others. And I will see you online, if not in person, sometime soon. Okay, Shavua Tov.